I joined the Independent, as I said, in 1986. I wasn't exactly a kind of naive young provincial. I'd already spent some time working on newspapers. I was in my early 30s, but I'd never worked in London for national newspapers. At that point, national newspapers were, this was obviously a pre-internet, pre-digital era, were kind of locked in a sort of stasis of of their own making. They were heavily unionized. They were hampered by old technology. They were very much in hock to a series of media barons, such as Rupert Murdoch and the Harmsworths who ran the Daily Mail and so forth. The Independent was started, as has been well recorded, by three former Daily Telegraph journalists led by Andreas Whittam Smith, a rather patrician trio, but who had a kind of conception for a new idea, a new way of doing newspapers that kind of broke this deadlock that existed in Fleet Street, that made the most of new technology. I'd seen myself on the Birmingham Post where I worked, and I was by that point an executive on the Birmingham Post in my early 30s. I'd been a reporter there for some years. I could see the benefits of new technology in the provinces, which were less heavily unionized than the Fleet Street newspapers, had made much greater advances in new technology. And the vision of Andreas Whittam Smith, Stephen Glover, and Matthew Simons was to create a newspaper which kind of broke free of some of these shackles that bound the existing press, both the production and union shackles, and also to sort of break some of the mold of newspapers. Newspapers tended to be very polarized. You had the Daily Mirror, which was very traditional Labour supporting. You had the Guardian, which was sort of middle class-ish Labour supporting. It was a paper of the public sector workers, of teachers and of doctors and health workers and so forth. And then you had basically a kind of series of papers which were all very much set on the right: the Daily Mail, the Express, the Times, Telegraph, and so forth. Murdoch owned the Times, the Sun, News of the World. And all of these papers on the right formed a big block of Tory supporting papers. There was the Mirror and the Guardian kind of on the left, and there was no one really speaking for a kind of middle ground in a way. No one that would. There were other things that were troubling. Newspapers had a very deferential attitude towards the establishment. It was the height of the kind of deference towards the royal family, the sort of the obsession with Princess Diana was sort of almost at its height. So there were advances in new technology which made it possible to do different things. And the first paper to really break the mold was the Today newspaper, set up by Eddie Shah in the north of England, which aimed to use new technology. It recruited a whole fresh team of journalists. And that was the thing that gave Andreas Whittam Smith the inspiration to set up the Independent. And all of this happened over his plans became public in I think it was the day after Boxing Day, just after Christmas 1985. And the intention was to launch the paper in later that year. And I was in Birmingham at the time, and this sent a kind of electric thrill through journalism that there might be something that would break this deadlock, that would open up careers for journalists, and particularly those of us who felt our career was not in the popular newspapers, which again were, the sort of red top tabloids were at their height in those days. That there was a kind of career possibility for those of us who didn't see that tabloids were the only way to go.